Okay, so this is my project on concussions, an evolving public health issue. I began this project over the summer at Weill Cornell Medical College. What got me interested in the topic specifically is my previous experience with concussions and also knowing of a lot of people, being an athlete myself, that have endured concussions. It's a pretty interesting topic, but not much is known about it. So I decided to, take some extra time over the summer to learn more about it myself. So what is a concussion exactly? A concussion is a traumatically induced transient disturbance of brain functions and involves a complex pathophysiological process. This is defined by the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine. Prevalence. Traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs, contribute to 30% of all injury deaths. Concussion is a type of TBI. Nearly 138 people die every day from injuries that include TBIs. Incidence in young children equals about 304 cases per 1,000. More specifically, and more importantly, the reports of TBIs and concussions are increasing about twofold in the past 10 years. So through different type of research that I've been able to look up and, talking to different physicians over the summer, there are 3 different type of tests currently being used to diagnose concussions. The first is, and most importantly that we'll discuss in this presentation, is the impact testing, that stands for immediate post-concussion assessment and cognitive testing. The second is a cranial computerized tomography scan, which is a CT scan. That's very familiar to all of us, most likely. The other more popular type of brain imaging is an MRI, or a magnetic resonance imaging. There are 2 types of MRIs, both a DTI and a resting state fMRI. These 2 different types are pretty cool, pretty interesting to look up if you do have the time. They show the difference in white matter in the brain and different neurological changes in the brain from brain mapping compared to your baseline and your post-concussion. Okay, so the most important type of testing that we'll discuss in this presentation is the impact testing. Impact testing goes over different type of activities to help diagnose the patient. It's more popular in an athletic setting. So what happens is the athlete, before they start their season, they take a baseline impact test. And then after they endure a concussion, immediately after, or a week, during their concussion, when they realize they may have one, they go to their PT and they take an impact test post-concussion. The impact test has different activities. There's color matching, design memory, and symbol matching. These different tests test for verbal memory, visual memory, reaction time. You also have a questionnaire at the beginning that's just general history of your previous, concussions, your sex, your age, what sport you play, what position you may play, for example. All of these factor into your impact testing score. So my hypothesis from reading an article from PubMed was if patients experience a concussion, their impact scores will decrease significantly compared to their baseline. So my experimental design, so it was very difficult at the beginning to find data for my topic. My topic is fairly new, fairly fresh on the scene. So there's not much data, let alone not much original data available on Google. So a lot of my colleagues were able to find, basic data, basic numbers on CDC, on PubMed, through our professor. I unfortunately was not. It took me a minute. Just recently this week, I stumbled upon an article that seemed to get my hypothesis across effectively if I analyze it using R. So I finally found data from PubMed. I analyzed that data using R programming. The most appropriate analyzing tool that I could find for my specific data was bar charts. The code I used was from previous knowledge of bar charts, but also from StackFlow. So StackFlow showed me a new not program, but a new way of doing a bar chart than from using like the regular art we use in class. And I believe it was called Lattice. And that was a way that I could go in and analyze, okay, for example, my charts had 3 different variables. I would want to compare sexes and numbers and different categories. And the only way I could think to do that was by using a bar chart. That was something we never really learned how to do in that much detail. So I did have to go on Google, and I did have to, reach out to an outside source. Actually, let me go and try to show you another page. Let's go to RStudio. Okay, so in RStudio, let's see if this works. For example, I wanted to, go over what concussion history was, and put it in a bar chart. Currently, the data was given to me like this, and I had to convert it to a different format of a data frame in order to get an appropriate bar chart that's seen in my paper. And I'll go into more detail with visual memory and verbal memory, but more specifically, I did have to alter my data in order to be able to analyze it. And the best way to analyze it was through a bar chart using Lattice. Okay, so back to my presentation. After going over my data, I was able to summarize my implications based off my findings. So the following are my findings. So the article gathered up all the averages of impact data, specifically verbal memory and visual memory. So this chart is verbal memory that I made. The blue is baseline, the pink is post-injury. So here you have patients that were above average, average, and below average. Baseline, as you can see, above average was about a little bit over 85, but right after having a concussion, it was lower than 80. A more significant change would be below average, patients that had already had some sort of intellectual impairment. They were still low at baseline, the lowest, a little bit over 80. And then after experience a concussion, they were below 65. And that's a very popular finding amongst research that I found over the summer, is that patients who had already experienced, mental health issues were at a greater risk of symptoms after enduring a concussion. The same findings were seen in visual memory impact data scores. The scores were greatly, lower compared to baseline, as you can see. And this is the bar charts I was talking about. These are the type of bar charts I use because it made more sense to analyze all those different variables into one chart, and so that you could see the difference. And both of these charts solidify or prove that my hypothesis was correct. Weaknesses in my paper, there were a few. It was difficult to find data, as previously stated, especially as extensive as was asked for. The data, therefore, couldn't be analyzed as in great detail. So I know how to do t-tests, and I know how to do histograms and basic plots. It was fairly easy to learn R throughout the course, the bioinformatics course this semester. However, there was no use or no need for that in the findings or the data that I was able to find. There wasn't much significance in doing a t-test or in doing a plot because there was no original data to deeply analyze. Everything that was given to me was already analyzed, it was pre-analyzed data, so they were already averaged out. So the best way for me to show you the significant difference in findings from baseline and post-injury was to use a bar chart, which I did. And the data was also analyzed in a different way in the research paper. The research paper gave different implications than I did. My hypothesis, I decided to use a different one in the paper, just to refrain from any copyright or what have you. I decided to focus in on the difference between the scores in the impact test. And that can, mean that there's some sort of weakness in my analysis. I could have misread what the article was trying to imply or what the data was actually implying, what the number collections were actually implying, based off of me wanting to prove my hypothesis correct. So there is some bias in that. There's also, based off of my knowledge and what was written in the paper, there are some gaps and there was some difficulty in understanding what was going on in the paper. So that could also attest to any gaps that may be found in my data analysis. So for future studies, there's currently, a lot of work being done to find a golden standard, but this article and my data analysis is showing me that the impact test could possibly be a great golden standard, especially for athletes coming fresh off experience a concussion off the field. More testing on correlations between mood disorders, and neurological functions and concussions can be done as well. More specialized concussion clinics need to be built in order to find these implications. These studies are very rare to find. So I would assume when you are experiencing a concussion, it's very hard to diagnose. It's very hard to find treatment, find people that actually understand the depth of what you are going through in order for you to maintain adequate treatment and adequate concussion training. And there has to be spaces for that. The same way there is a space for cancer, there should be a space for concussion patients. There should be a change in concussion culture because there is implications that there's such a great difference in performance. There should be more rules and regulations in sports, increasing reporting rates between, the PT and the actual athlete, the seriousness and the precaution of actually doing a sport. All these things are greater importance now that I've been able to see and show that there's such a great difference in baseline and post-injury. And currently, all you see right now is verbal memory and visual memory, but there are a number of different things that the impact test shows you. So maybe too, there could be more research and more data collected from those numbers, and those can be analyzed in R as well to hopefully show the great difference between baseline and post-injury concussions. So that was my project, a little bit different from everybody else did, and it's near and dear to my heart because I love sports medicine. So thank you for listening.